It's okay. We're like these testosterone-filled tornadoes, if you will. But in reality, we are so much more than that. And when we say boys will be boys, I think we are...
It's an urban style, but it also carries a certain chickness that makes it stand out. When it comes to all the rumors circulating in the media, you can probably guess what I mean. People read gossip magazines or follow social media, and they see headlines claiming that everyone is dating everyone else, that everyone secretly hates each other, that everyone has undergone countless cosmetic procedures, or even ridiculous theories about our identities. The truth is, most of these stories are completely exaggerated, if not entirely false, and it's almost impossible to take them seriously. Real life for us is far richer, far more complex, and infinitely more exciting than what is portrayed in these gossip columns. In reality, our day-to-day interactions, our friendships, and even our small victories are much more interesting than manufactured scandals. You wouldn't want to hear that we all actually get along and support each other, right? That kind of reality doesn't sell magazines, but it's the truth. Speaking of reality, Blake Lively has recently filed her responses to the motions for judgment on the pleadings and for summary judgment, and they offer an interesting insight into her legal strategy. At first glance, the summary judgment filing is extremely difficult to read because a large portion of it is heavily redacted. It's hard to discern the specifics of her arguments, the evidence she's referencing, or what conclusions she's hoping the court will reach. Some pages are so heavily blacked out that it feels like more than half of the document is missing, leaving readers to piece together the argument from the fragments that remain. On the other hand, her motion for judgment on the pleadings spends a significant amount of time arguing that the court shouldn't even consider certain claims or evidence, suggesting that the court should instead focus on the summary judgment and the supporting documentation. Essentially, she seems to be telling the court to follow the summary judgment, which may be a deliberate tactic to sidestep weaknesses in her second amended complaint, as pointed out by Wayfair. If the court limits itself to reviewing the pleadings rather than diving into all the evidence, its task is relatively narrow. It only needs to determine whether the pleadings were properly filed, whether California law is applicable, and whether the FIA has extraterritorial authority, meaning whether it can govern actions that occurred on a New Jersey set or even within Blake Lively's private residence. Production planning discussions, casting decisions, and the setup of HR systems and the events on set, as a way of arguing that California law should apply. She even references conversations with individuals like Alex Sachs to support this connection, although the relevance of these points may seem tenuous to some observers. To have the court enforce the actors' loan-out agreement and affirm that California law governs the dispute, whether this will be persuasive remains uncertain. But it's clear that her filings are designed to influence the court's perspective strategically. Across both filings, Lively seems to be trying to shift the narrative in her favor. She repeatedly addresses situations brought up by Wayfair and provides alternative accounts or interpretations, effectively attempting to create disputes over material facts. By framing the events in this way, she's trying to convince the court that there are significant contested issues that require careful consideration, rather than a straightforward dismissal of her claims. Her strategy suggests a dual approach. Not only is she challenging the legal basis of Wayfair's arguments, but she is also attempting to shape the narrative surrounding the case itself, emphasizing her perspective and framing the facts in a way that could work in her favor. If the court sees merit in her interpretations, these are exactly the reasons why this case needs to go to trial. Our facts are not the same, our experiences are not the same, and their version of events differs significantly from mine. Ultimately, a jury needs to hear both sides and decide for themselves. Blake Lively's point of view is markedly different from Justin Baldoni's, and it's clear that there are substantial disputes over the facts. One unusual aspect I noticed in her filings is that she brings up situations involving other women on set. People who never filed lawsuits, never submitted HR complaints, and are not litigants in this case. By referencing these individuals, he appears to be attempting to construct a narrative for the court suggesting that she was targeted because she was a woman. Essentially, she is trying to argue that the problem was not isolated to her alone but was pervasive across the production. However, much of this may be irrelevant to her claims, as it does not directly involve her experiences and may not be persuasive to the judge. A recurring theme in her argument is the claim that Wayfair, the production company, lacked sufficient experience to make this film. According to her, the company was green and had no business producing a project of this scale. While it's true that Wayfair was a relatively new production company with fewer large-scale productions under its belt, they still owned the intellectual property rights and had the authority to make decisions about the film. Lively, having previously worked with established directors like Oliver Stone, Woody Allen, and Ben Affleck. Figures, known for being challenging in their own ways, may have expected to always collaborate with top-tier directors. In contrast, this project was led by a relatively new director working on only his second or third film, which she emphasizes in her filings as a point of contention. She also frames her argument around Baldoni's alleged monetization of his feminist brand through Wayfair, co-founded with billionaire Sorowitz, a financier and close associate. Shortly after launching, Wayfair acquired the film rights to Colleen Hoover's novel It Ends With Us, a story centered on female empowerment and breaking cycles of domestic violence. Hoover reportedly agreed to sell the rights to Wayfair because she trusted Baldoni's feminist vision and specifically requested that a woman direct the film. Lively seems to use this to imply that Baldoni should not have directed the project himself. However, Hoover sold the rights to her story, not the right to dictate who could direct the film. Ultimately, Baldoni, as the rights holder, had the authority to make creative and production decisions. Lively appears to be trying to create a disputed fact about whether Baldoni was always intended to direct, but the evidence suggests that this was always his prerogative and aligned with his ownership of the intellectual property. Her filings further attempt to paint Wayfair as inexperienced while simultaneously asserting that the company had full control over the production. Heath, a relatively inexperienced producer, was appointed as the lead producer and president of It Ends With Us. Overseeing Sachs, an experienced independent producer, Sony agreed to distribute and co-finance the film. While Wayfair maintained oversight of all aspects of production, including casting and crew, Lively seems to suggest that this lack of experience led to conflicts on set. According to deposition transcripts, some issues involving women on set, including Christy Hall, Isabella Fared, and Jenny Slate, stemmed from disputes over control. Some women wanted more creative input, decision-making power, or leadership roles beyond their assigned positions. As director, Baldoni was tasked with managing these conflicts alongside other producers like Jamie and Alex Sachs, but clashes over authority, creative control, and expectations were common. One notable example involves Christy Hall, the screenwriter, who reportedly wanted to take on a directorial role but was declined because she was simultaneously working on other projects. She felt dismissed and excluded, which contributed to tension around the premiere and promotional events. As reflected in communications between Alex Sachs and Giannati, Lively's filings attempt to attribute some of these conflicts directly to Baldoni, suggesting that he fostered a hostile environment. However, much of the evidence points to a combination of inexperience, overlapping responsibilities, and differing expectations, rather than targeted misconduct. In essence, Lively's narrative seeks to highlight disputes and conflicts on set, frame them as gender-specific issues, and challenge Wayfair's production choices, while simultaneously creating disputed facts for the court to consider. According to the filings, Justin Baldoni was described as being dismissive towards some cast members, particularly when certain individuals, like Christy Hall, expressed interest in directing or co-directing the film. After she had previously worked on another project, she hoped to co-direct this film, but co-directing is not a standard practice, especially when a director has already been assigned. Wanting to direct or co-direct does not automatically entitle someone to the position, and being told no is being framed in her filings as dismissive behavior. To put it into perspective, it would be akin to walking into a job and demanding to be the boss, only to be told no. The refusal does not automatically make the employer dismissive or discriminatory. Alex Sachs, another producer, reportedly wanted to assume the role of head producer and was displeased when Jamie was brought on board. She believed her experience qualified her to manage the production without additional oversight. She effectively became an intermediary among other cast and crew members who had their own ideas about control, authority, and influence on set, a dynamic that is very common in Hollywood productions, especially high-pressure environments with multiple producers, directors, and creative stakeholders. Although there was a clause in Baldoni's contract allowing for the replacement of the director under certain circumstances, all parties initially agreed that he would serve as the director. Despite disagreements and interpersonal tensions, many issues stemmed from individuals seeking control they were not contractually entitled to rather than misconduct by Baldoni. It is also worth noting that Justin was not without flaw. There were instances in which he raised his voice. However, much of the conflict appeared to result from the clashing of personalities and ambitions. Lively's summary judgment filings focus heavily on defending herself, asserting that she did not manipulate the cast against Justin. According to her argument, any dissatisfaction among cast members, including Christy Hall and Alex Sachs, arose from disagreements over authority and creative decisions rather than her influence. Some cast members may have believed that, because this was a smaller or green production, they would have more autonomy and empowerment than in larger, more structured productions. Blake Lively herself has a reputation for creating high expectations and a strong presence on set, and has a vision for the project that she considers paramount. While minor disagreements naturally occurred, very few cast members expressed hostility toward Justin until Lively became involved. For instance, actors like Jenny Slate and Isabella Ferrer reportedly did not have complaints until influenced by interactions with Lively. Alex Sachs noted in her deposition that some cast members' reluctance to participate in press or promotional events with Justin stemmed from what they had heard, not necessarily what they had personally experienced, specifically around the time of the book's promotion. Alex confirmed that most cast members, including Lively, Slate, Ferrer, Hoover and Hall, did not want to appear in press events with Baldoni. This does not include the actor portraying young Atlas, but it highlights how second-hand accounts and perceptions can shape behavior on set. Essentially, if someone aims to influence opinions, they might exaggerate or misrepresent events, creating conflicts that otherwise would not have existed. The production was large and high-stress, which compounded misunderstandings. Alex herself acknowledged that the environment was overwhelming for both her and Baldoni. While she described him as a narcissist, it is unclear whether this label accurately reflects his behavior, or whether it simply reflects the heightened tensions and egos present in Hollywood productions. Disagreements were often resolved, and apologies were exchanged, demonstrating that many conflicts were situational rather than indicative of systemic hostility or misconduct. In reviewing the motion for summary judgment, it becomes clear that Blake Lively spends an extraordinary amount of time recounting her version of events, repeatedly emphasizing Justin Baldoni's behavior. Justin did this. Justin did that. Everyone hates Justin, yet almost all of this is heavily redacted. The bulk of the issues at the beginning of production centered primarily on two individuals, Blake herself and Jenny Slate. Both had complaints and preferences about the director, and Jenny, in particular, demanded that Jaime Heath not be on set again. These two women were essentially the only ones pushing for changes in the leadership of the production. Despite the length of her statements spanning roughly 35 pages when it comes to the legal arguments, Justin Baldoni himself is almost entirely absent. Comments about sexualized behavior, dancing, or even discussions about his body are either ignored or presented without context, leaving the claims vague and disconnected from actionable legal points. For instance, there are mentions of improvised kisses and lingering physical interactions, but these are not tied to any legal standards sufficient to justify a trial against Justin. Lively devotes only about 4 pages to sexual harassment claims, and even there she does not argue that Baldoni's actions alone warrant bringing the case to trial. Instead, much of her argument points to Jaime Heath's conduct as the primary reason summary judgment should be denied. A notable strategy in her filings is the reliance on the experiences of other women on set, women who are not litigants and have never accused Justin of sexual harassment. Lively attempts to frame these incidents as evidence of a pervasive, gender-specific problem, suggesting that the hostility on set affected women uniquely and thereby bolstered her claims. However, since these women are not part of the case, their experiences are largely irrelevant to her legal arguments. She also seeks to emphasize the pervasiveness of harassment by detailing Heath's actions, such as intrusions into her hair and makeup trailer and showing a nude video at work after filming a birth scene. These events, she argues, would be humiliating and degrading to any reasonable person. Yet in doing so, she blurs the focus between Baldoni's alleged behavior and the actual conduct that might justify legal action. Claiming that Baldoni and Heath acted with impunity and attempted to cover up misconduct, she asserts that their control over the production hindered her ability to develop chemistry with her co-star, presumably Justin Baldoni, her to spend significant time reporting and trying to address these perceived issues. Interestingly, her complaint itself indicates that after January 4, when filming resumed, no further incidents occurred. Yet in the summary judgment filings, she suggests there may have been ongoing problems. She attempts to navigate around the supervisory relationship, emphasizing that Baldoni and Heath were her superiors and she was obliged to follow their policies. But this explanation occupies only a few pages of her overall filing. The substantive claims against Justin Baldoni appear minimal and underdeveloped. Much of the narrative focuses on redacted statements, second-hand accounts, or incidents involving individuals not party to the case. And the strongest harassment claims are directed at Heath rather than Baldoni. In essence, the summary judgment filing presents an extensive account of conflicts and tensions on set but provides little concrete legal basis for holding Justin personally accountable. Ultimately, the 4 pages that Lively devotes to what she claims is severe and pervasive sexual harassment largely rely on mischaracterized or overstated incidents. For example, she references a video allegedly shown after filming had concluded, but the timeline shows that the scene had not even started when the video was played. Similarly, claims that Baldoni stared at her exposed breasts are inconsistent with testimony from Alex Sachs, who indicated that Baldoni knocked on the trailer door and was invited in. According to Sachs, Lively herself said he could enter as long as she didn't look. and she wasn't facing him when she later noticed him looking in her direction. How she could claim he was staring the entire time is unclear, suggesting this incident has been over, and if Lively had truly felt uncomfortable, she had the agency to say no. But she explicitly allowed him to enter, making the claim appear less credible as evidence of harassment. The filings also show that much of the alleged misconduct, including interactions with Jaime Heath, that has been framed in ways that emphasize hostility or impropriety. Yet the legal arguments connecting these incidents to trial-worthy sexual harassment are minimal. Lively spends roughly 35 pages recounting conflicts and interpersonal tensions on set, but only 4 pages actually address sexual harassment claims, and even then, there is scant legal reasoning provided to justify why these claims should proceed to trial. The remainder of her summary judgment filing, spanning 10 pages, focuses on alleged retaliation. This imbalance underscores a critical weakness in her case. If the sexual harassment claims are unsubstantiated, there is no foundation for retaliation claims. Many legal analysts covering the case have noted that the alleged incidents, as described, do not rise to the level of severe or pervasive conduct sufficient to warrant a trial. In essence, while Lively's filings attempt to rewrite the narrative and portray Baldoni in a negative light, none of the evidence presented convincingly supports claims of sexual harassment. Much of the story relies on mischaracterizations, second-hand accounts, or actions by individuals who are not even party to the lawsuit. The summary judgment filings, therefore, provide an extensive account of conflicts, complaints, and frustrations on set but fail to establish a legal basis for holding Baldoni personally accountable. This analysis highlights the core issue. The bulk of her claims focus on disputes over control, interpersonal disagreements, and perceived slights, rather than concrete, legally actionable harassment. The incidents she cites, whether involving video, trailer interactions, or disagreements over directing, do not independently create trialable issues against Baldoni. In short, the motion for summary judgment exposes significant weaknesses in her argument, and the portions of her filing that attempt to establish harassment are thin and unconvincing.